Okay, so hello everybody and welcome to Jozi.js May. You'll notice that things are a little bit different. Things look a little bit different at the outset. So we're also not, we're struggling somewhat with the format of online meetups and talks. So we thought we'd do something a little bit more engaging and a little bit different. We also miss conferences, and we miss talking about the stuff that we learned at conferences and sharing knowledge, right? So what we thought we would do, considering that there are two huge conferences that have happened in the last 2 weeks, the first being Google I/O and the second being this week in MS Build. And we thought we would pick our favorite talks from the conferences and then discuss amongst ourselves and share our opinions and encourage you, the few viewers that are watching this live, to ask your questions, and we will answer them. So in the interest of time, because we're going to try and stay as close to time as possible, because we can talk rubbish for an endless amount of time, we're going to dive straight into it. And we're going to start with Sheena.
Thanks, Mike. So the talk that struck me the hardest is to do with the future of tech is Africa. The future is Africa, and it's pretty awesome. Like I was surprised to see the title there, but it is something that I believe and support. So what does that mean? Currently there's about 700,000 developers in Africa, and about 120,000 of those people are in South Africa. So that's like quite an epic number. A couple of I can tell you stats, but you can just watch the talk. What I find really interesting about that is that it seems to be because of the fact that a lot of people are just moving to urban centers, and also networking is becoming more accessible, devices are becoming more accessible, networks are becoming more reliable, electricity is becoming more reliable in a lot of places, not necessarily here. And that's all freaking great. Another striking thing for me is the fact that the developers tend to be young. So there's a shift of, the distribution is a little bit different in Africa compared to other places. Like we've got a lot more, it's more junior heavy than senior heavy. And we've also got a bit of a brain drain problem, which is quite a big deal because junior devs are they need some kind of support and leadership and mentorship in order to grow as fast as they can. So I think that there's an issue there that needs to be solved. I also think that looking at how people become developers is also really interesting. So about 30% of people go through traditional education systems, so universities and whatnot, and universities take a long time, and a lot of the stuff that they teach, unfortunately, it varies from university to university, but a lot of stuff is kind of outdated. So it's big and slow. And there's a lot of high quality stuff that happens, but it's odd. And then there's a lot of people who are self-taught as well. And I think that that's kind of it's a really good thing that people can go out and teach themselves what they need to know. But I think that's a really bad thing that there's a lot of resume padding that happens as well. So that's dodgy. So you get all these about a third of developers in Africa who are self-taught. There's a bunch of those guys, I don't know how many, who will do a lot of tutorials and then write that stuff down on their CVs and say, I can do all the stuff, and then they can't. And that's a difficult thing because it makes it very hard to hire good help. The last kind of education stream is alt education, so going through boot camps and that sort of thing. And that's something that I'm quite passionate about and quite involved in. I'm just listing problems, but here's one more problem. Alternative education it's kind of an expensive thing, and it's either paid for by the student, and a lot of the time there'll be either an upfront giant payment, or they'll be paying back over time with their salary, or the or their education is funded by some business that wants access to that talent or wants some BEE points. So the danger with that latter revenue stream is that it's dangerous for the companies, because like if I'm a big corporate and I'm like, hey, I need some talent in a year, I'm gonna reach out to a boot camp and pay them a bunch of money and please give me 10 devs. That's like a lot of money. And if you haven't worked with that that education provider before, it's a lot of risk, because like in a year's time, you get to know if it was successful or not. Like there isn't, like alt ed doesn't have a firm standard. Everyone's different. So yeah, like, so in summary, I guess the African development industry is growing a lot. There's a ton of people who are keen to be doing this and a ton of people getting into it. But there's also a lot of chaos that needs to be wrangled and dealt with. Yeah, that's my piece.
So I also watched that talk. I thought it was really, really cool, and I have strong feelings about it. But I'm going to give somebody else a chance to reply first. Who wants to go? Who wants to ask questions or
I actually
express opinion?
One thing I noticed when I watched the talk, one of the things they mentioned, which again, pointing out more problems, but they talked about where most of the developers are in the African continent, and it's the four big countries: South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, and they hold like some big percentage. I can't remember the exact number now. Of the developers, whereas like if you think about it, the rest of Africa has a lot of people as well, and yet they barely have any even access to technology probably. So yeah, that's one thing I found really interesting about it as well. We always talk about the big African countries, but
but there's some hotspots.
Yeah,
which is my question. Sorry, Mike. That what results to exactly that? Would it be the fact that because like hubs and access, it's not necessarily that we can't go there, and like because we went a few. What is this? Is it iHub that they mentioned also in the video? They went to Kenya and started a center where people can learn, and that's not evenly spread in the country. So what were the variables that they use to actually identify places in Africa where they can actually install, for lack of a better word, or start iHub? And that's maybe I
think there's a lot of challenges there. So like one is again internet access and devices, because like some devices to get online would be like a person's salary for the month, and they don't have that much, and so sorry, you got to eat. So there's a lot of just like financial barriers for the people who want to get into the field, and then on top of that, there's a difficulty in getting funding for large projects across Africa. So I think probably both of those go into the fact that there are certain hotspots where things are working, and I assume it'll radiate outwards. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Yeah.
So I'm gonna jump in at this point, because I think every point that you've raised is incredibly salient and valid, and we need to keep a razor focus on the problems that we're seeing so we can try and solve them, right? But I'm going to take a little bit of a different spin, and I suppose it's a little bit different for me because I know John Kimani and I know Andy Falk, and seeing them present this talk entitled "The Future is African" at I/O, one of the biggest conferences on the calendar, to who knows how many million developers, and it's the kind of content that a lot of American and European audience members would never have seen. They would never have interacted with these people, and seeing that was just wonderful. Talking about the scale of the continent, the problems of the continent, the inequity, as well as the excitement, right? Because the thing that we mustn't lose sight of is that we, in a Pan-African sense, are very entrepreneurial and exciting, and are young in the field. So a lot of the traditional barriers to entry and the traditional barriers to acceptance are just not there for us, right? We don't have to play by the rules that Europe and America have set. We come up with our own rules. And I think that's very evident if you look at how African startups and African ecosystems work. So from that perspective, it was very exciting to see it happen. And I think that it's sort of a canary in that us talking about that topic at an event with such a big global player like Google is really awesome as one. And then the second one, and the thing that I enjoyed about that talk, is that like the strategic view of Africa going forward. To be quite blunt, like a lot of the other places that are interesting from a software perspective at the moment target large bodies of people that have deep internet penetration. So India, Southeast Asia, Europe, America, places where they have most of their people, probably like high 80% of their people that have internet access, they've all got smartphones. These are saturated marketplaces, but they're also marketplaces that current software companies can grow. One of the points that was made was the idea that Africa is a very sparse landscape. We have a lot of space. We're not going to be vulnerable to overpopulation for a very, very long time. And at the moment, we're gathered around these metropolises, but that'll change. And I think I can't remember the exact numbers either. I'm sorry, but when they forecast and they said by 2050 how many developers there would be, and I think it ended up being like 3 out of every 4 software developers or something along those lines is going to come from Africa, just because of the space that we've got, the population growth that we have, and like that's not an uncomfortable number. And if you forecast another 30 years and you look at, with the sort of rapid growth in terms of technology adoption and growing at a ground level, I think that strategically posts a huge opportunity to be African.
Yeah. Okay. I think like I was pointing out a lot of problems, but there are like opportunities as well. I think it's where my mind lands. It's like, oh, we can fix that. That maybe is a bit harder, but it's definitely very positive. Yeah.
Some good stoic thinking there.
That's how I roll.
So are there any, if there are any questions from the audience, please feel free to put in the chat. If you've got any opinions or observations, please share them. We'd love to get some engagement, right? We're missing people. And we want to answer questions and hear what you have to think. If it's not about this topic, maybe it's the next one, but I'm not sure. Does anybody else have anything else they want to talk about this particular topic?
I've got a question for Sheila, just on some of the educational issues that you've brought up in the South African context. I think so. Some thoughts first. Firstly, I think our big old universities got a shock of their lives last year when the country went into lockdown, and some haven't actually been able to even finish their academic year because of how unprepared they were for all of this. There are some, the more resourced ones, who are able to sort of float and survive and finish their academic years. And so I wonder if that experience is going to, or is shaping the future of what formal education looks like in South Africa, or as soon as we're past this pandemic, we're going to go back to being in person, because currently this online and hybrid model is very difficult, right? As someone who lectures, when I teach students, I can't expect them to have their cameras on because, not everyone has a stable connection. And you also don't want to be invasive. But at the same time, the engagement with the classes and with the content also drops. I see it also at work when I'm training other junior engineers. When they are there in person, the engagement is big and everyone's participating. And when it's remote or when the same person is not sitting in front of you, the engagement is the same. So do you think that what we're currently going through is going to stay and maybe sway these big organizations, or are we just going to see the same old?
I suspect that I suspect that universities will probably try and click back into their old ways of doing things. Like it's a strong suspicion, but I could easily be wrong. Yeah, like it seems to me that from the people that I've spoken to so far, online university classes are like not terribly engaging. And for me, I feel like a lot of what a university is about, sure, it's about the content and the stuff that you're learning, but it's also about the personal growth and the making connections with people and the doing naughty stuff and getting into trouble.
I was about to say drinking, it's about drinking. You want to say? Okay, it's not like this is recorded forever, Sheena.
I'm not going to be too specific there, but like all of that is lost. Like the university kids are just like isolated and they can get the same content from Coursera, you know, and then like universities seem to be acting like glorified textbooks, which isn't really the best thing. So there's like that part of it. And then the other part is like getting people to engage is hard. Like people don't like to struggle and read, and they'll like watch YouTube videos and get an illusion of competence and like watch somebody else do work and then like think that they know how to do it now and nonsense like that. And that's really tough. So like, yeah, like there's a lot of difficulties there, and trying to figure out how to make learning an engaging and effective experiences is tough. We should talk about, like, I think I've probably gone over time with this topic. Is it cool if we continue?
Yeah, let's go. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, like it's tough. I think like another part of it is that a university technical course doesn't in any way resemble real work. So it's like you have a sage on the stage telling you what's up, and you have to read some textbooks and build some stuff mostly by yourself. And it's like it doesn't resemble real life. And then somebody gets a job after university and they're like, what's Git, you know? Or like, how do I team? And that's also a really big challenge. Like, what is this, like, what is a Kanban board? You know, the stuff like that where you want to, yeah, you need people to be able to interact as an effective team and like work with people who have different skill sets, and that's not something that you get to practice at university either. So like we have at Muzi, we've done a whole lot of different things to try and keep things quite engaging, and I think that we've been quite successful. I think when we had to move to remote, it was incredibly challenging and incredibly stressful. But since we've been remote, our recruits, aka students, have been fantastic. I think one thing that goes into the fact that they're fantastic is that pre-COVID, we selected a bunch of students to join us, and we selected them through like in-person analog, you know, boot camps, and just like when we were there to look after them in person. And those guys didn't actually do that well after we shifted to remote because we were selecting for certain things. And now if we select people for their ability to do online learning, they seem to do better. But also the process we put them into is better. So there's a million variables. Yeah.
So I think we do need to decouple a couple points here, because the one aspect that like you brought up is the remote and the remote friendliness and the remote learning of these organizations. And the other one is the vocational training versus educational training of universities. And I think it would be disingenuous to conflate the two. And I think it would be disingenuous to try and pretend that universities are there to provide vocational training, because they're not.
Yeah.
And that's a problem with how we see universities, not a problem with universities. But if we look at the remote-oriented aspect, I think that those that can learn remotely are inherently privileged. And I think Lucky alluded to that, right? You've got more internet access. You've got a computer of your own. And these are challenges that limit the growth in technology in South Africa, in Africa, but in South Africa specifically. And we are culturally, as Africans, far more communal learners. We learn from one another. We learn by talking and showing, rather than learning by reading documentation or, learning conventionally or learning by oneself. I think that from that perspective, there will be a huge swing back to normalcy when things go back. And I just hope that some of the affordances, because again, everything is levers and trade-offs, right? And some of the affordances of remote work is there are people who have been able to engage in remote learning and have opportunities to, despite the fact that maybe they've had kids to look after, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they've had other obligations. Maybe they could catch it up after hours. And, it doesn't, the people that are working jobs and learning at the same time and studying, they get benefit because they don't have to be in that class at that time as a human being. Otherwise, they're going to be kicked out of the university.
Yeah.
So I think that there are trade-offs, right? And we must remember that there are positive things that have come out of this, and sort of identify both facets and see which we can facilitate.
I think sorry, I know we're doing lots of overtime, but one last thing. So a friend is a principal at a high school, and she also teaches maths. And for matric students, especially, the last year I think was quite challenging. And for her as the principal, she had to come up with a way to teach the children, even though they had to stay at home. And they have kids of all kinds in their school, ones whose parents are very wealthy and ones whose parents aren't wealthy. And what they actually ended up doing, which I found really interesting, is they did all of their lessons over WhatsApp, because WhatsApp is one of the most popular platforms in South Africa. And they did WhatsApp calls, they did videos which they sent to the parents on WhatsApp to help the children. Yet at the same time, in her opinion, when she was watching this happening, it was going quite well, and it seemed like everything was going all right. And then when they went back to school towards the end of last year, she was recapping their maths lessons before their exams, and she said, "Okay, so who remembers this?" She said everyone stared at her completely blank, because they're like. So yeah, it's difficult, and I think that's where that whole communal studying thing comes into play, because you learn from the people around you more. But I think on the other hand, it has given us a lot more new and creative ways of doing things, which is pretty cool. Like this, I mean, we didn't do this last year before. So yeah.
Okay, I think we might need to park the topic and move on to the second talk.
We have consensus. We have achieved consensus. We're going to move on.
Okay, I don't know if you want to introduce, but I really like how it segues to the next talk, the conversations that we're having. But if we need to pause for an introduction, let's do that. But I'm really excited about how actually what we're talking about really segues to this kind of, let's do it. Okay, so actually highlighting to this conversations is the accessibility of that information for people who want to learn that information. So as Jerry just mentioned, how you needed to be very creative to ensure that you are reaching the people that need to be reached with the content that you are providing, which is a really, really powerful thing. Because a lot of schools in these COVID times had to adhere to maybe what the schools recommended, like Meet or Teams or Zoom and all of those things. And that might not necessarily be accessible for other people who might have less internet and all those things. But just a step back, I chose the topic, which is design, what we call ALI or A11NE with material design, but that means accessibility. So designing accessibility with material design. And these are like Google like material design where like they adhere to like certain like accessibility things. And because I was very excited about this topic, I went and read a little bit of content or a little bit on the talk, what they mentioned. And I'm going to read through my slides.
Just a little bit, eh?
Just a little bit. But the description of it really is powerful in driving the message of what we need to talk about, because accessibility is not a buzzword that people just think that is being added into this world of like technology, but it really isn't, and it means something a little bit outside and even more than just the digital platforms that we work in. Easy example that what we just talked about, but accessibility means the practice of making products, environments, and social structures usable and inclusive to persons with disability. But disability is a very, very broad topic, or gets even broader depending on which perspective that you come from. And the talk that I was watching referred to one that was used by the World Health Organization, but I really like the one from Center for Disease Control and Prevention, which is a disability is any condition of the body or mind, so impairment, that makes it more difficult for the person with the condition to do certain activities or even interact with people. So we as humans can have some form of disability, like myself, or circumstances that create this inability to do something, and not necessarily a medical condition. So not being able to see if ever you hurt your eye, or like COVID, and now you need to use your internet at home as a person who's in South Africa to learn and read things. And then it goes broader, because like there's certain organizations and team forces that are teaching the world about what accessibility is, and are putting guidelines in place to ensure that people adhere to this in the web. But what is more important to me, or what I recognize in this topic, is how do I bring that into my everyday environment? And there's a story I have to tell you about this. So I went to the license department at this where I needed to renew my license. And when I got there, I was told that I couldn't actually renew my license because I needed to go book on a website and need to come with choose a certain slot in the website about of where I want to renew my license. And so I went back after obviously like creating and carving the time in like my schedule to actually make it there, only to be turned back. And I'm not saying that the license department individuals are not friendly, but sometimes you can find them in really not so nice days. So they might not be super helpful. So I had to go back and go and book in those websites, which was, I found it cryptic, even though I work in this environment, or in this industry, right? And I could imagine that the population in South Africa, who mostly don't speak English and maybe not might be very digital, could find this difficult. And that was like proven to me the next time when I went there, where a man who was between the ages of 50 to 65 or so was turned back. But not only did they not understand the instructions that they were told that they needed to do, they were confused, because as soon as he gets into his car, he's going to see a metro and he has to pay for stuff. So him having to understand that he needs to book on this website was a lot difficult. And even the person who was talking to him, who the language, the Vanek or that was used was like in English, he couldn't comprehend enough to make himself like efficient or proficient in the situation of trying to renew his driver's license. So no one who created that website considered or catered for people who might have issues with English, for example, or never mind like what I was going to talk about a little bit later on, like color contrast or being able to use keyboard. It's just an easy thing, like understanding the landscape in South Africa and seeing whether or not people would understand content made in English and or in any other language, but making sure that you like adjust it and provide supplement content to be able to make sure that your content is readable and understandable with the people who are supposed to consume it. This is what made this topic very personal to me. And I started looking at like the different types of stats that we have in South Africa for people with disability, which is around 3 million. And even though that's nothing compared to the 59 million population that we have, but that means that those people are there and they would want to have applications that also cater for them, at least make their lives a little bit easier when they have to do important things like renew their licenses. So that is pretty much what I got from this topic. And I had questions prepared for all the individuals in this panel. That's amazing.
You're going to ask us questions.
I'm going to ask you
questions.
I know that you need to ask me questions, but because it was such a topic that I really, really wanted people to just like go back and think about at this time, and then tell me what they think about accessibility, because it was a new topic. I say it's a new topic. It has been existing in a very long time, but we've never actually paid attention, especially with developers, and it's always pushed in the back foot. And I then started looking at the population in which we need to cater for people, and maybe not only just disability, but like how like, what is it that we need to think about, or what are your initial thoughts about this topic when it comes to the context of South Africa? And do you think it's relevant? Do you think, yeah.
So I'm going to jump in straight ahead, because we're talking about that damn Nuttis website that I hate so much. Everyone, anybody that's had to use that site to book for a driver's license hates it, irrespective of which class or privileged background you come from, right? But I can almost guarantee you that website and that functionality has not been tested on a feature phone. Like, looking at it now, I'm sorry, I'm that person. When somebody speaks about a website, I open in the background with DevTools, right? Looking at it now, there's no way that any of this stuff will work without JavaScript enabled, or a powerful phone, or a powerful enough phone running JavaScript. Okay, so there's immediately a massive class divide there, purely by running JavaScript or not, which is completely unnecessary for this damn website, because it's not good enough to need a JavaScript-based experience, right? But like, focusing just on the ally part rather than sort of the classist aspects of it, they break literally every rule. They've got spans that are buttons. They've got anchor tags, so hyperlinks that don't have links that they link to, right? It's a JavaScript void that they bound an Angular event to somewhere. And
I thought we stopped doing that 10 years ago.
So it's bad. So if you were a person that needed, okay, so I suppose this is a bad example, because if you're a person that needs visual assistance to use a website, you should maybe not be driving.
Unless you're a personal assistant and that's your occupation, you know?
But it also doesn't need you to be completely blind. You can be slightly impaired and it will still be a problem. You can maybe still drive with the right resources, but can't navigate a booking website.
I know we're being quite horrible about this website, but I recently had to renew my driver's license using this website. And thank God that both my husband and I are developers, because we actually had to go into the DevTools and change JavaScript in order to book our appointments.
Oh my gosh.
That's how bad it was. It was
I'm so
maybe it's time to write a green monkey.
We book our appointments.
So I need to renew my license in 2 months, and now I'm stressed.
So after you manage the booking, everything's fine after that. If you can navigate the website, everything afterwards is easy.
Okay.
So anyway, but back to accessibility. Sorry.
Yeah.
But
So
that website is a bad example.
So okay. So to my point being, right? Sorry, and Lucky, I'll let you go next. I'm really, really sorry. My point being that this is a government-provided website, right? They're providing a service to their people. They're not making money out of this. They can't say, oh well, that demographic of person or can't use our service, whatever. We don't care about their money because they're not wealthy anyway, right? Or whatever argument you've heard, and I've heard some pearlers. Let me tell you, but like it's a public service. It has to work for everyone. It can't be cut across class divides, and it can't exclude people based off of something that's actually so easy to get right. It's in the primitives of the language. And cycling back to what Rudy's talk is actually about, is it's using a visually appealing design system that people like using, and it's how you can use this design system to tick both boxes, right? Not just have the pretty buttons and colors that you like easily, but also be accessible. Also make sure that your design system choice doesn't exclude people.
Yeah. And I think, I think it was the European Union that passed the resolution about accessibility. And I think as time goes by, we're going to start seeing a lot more of that. I think it'll be a while before it makes its way into Africa, but I think that it's a sign of good things to come with regards to making accessibility not an afterthought, but actually a first-class citizen in how you build your website, and not just websites, but also your applications, whatever you might be building.
And that's really important because, oh, sorry, Jerry, you want to go?
I just wanted to add to what Ryan said. I heard recently, I'm not sure if it was Google that or one of the other search engines said something about that they're actually going to reduce your SEO if your site is not accessible, which I think is amazing.
And things like this need to be put in place because I am not like, I'm also at fault as a developer in this, is that even when I create applications, it's not a first-class citizen, as you mentioned, Ryan, that I'm not thinking about accessibility out of the box. And because we're not normalizing it, it becomes another cognitive load, another English word that I learned as I prepared the slides, that I needed to think about when I, create my applications, because I have to go and actually think about how can I make this accessible. It's not natural, it's not normalized, and it will take a while to get there, but it will be really nice that we could get there to cater for situations like that where we don't have to do anything special. Just like any other person, just the usability of something that's very important to a person being functional in the world becomes so difficult because no one actually thought about the usability of that thing. I don't even know if ever the people who created the application can use it themselves, because surely when you test something in a feature, there should be some form of review whether or not it meets the feature description or what's going on. It's just we're not making it a priority.
Yeah. So you've actually struck a chord here. So Don Norman says once you notice and you take note of bad design, you start seeing it everywhere. So the Minister of Health was on a Power FM interview, and they were talking about the registration for the COVID-19 vaccine. And a caller called in and said, I'm using an assistive tool to use my computer, and my tool can't actually navigate to your website. So I quickly went onto that website that day, and the lack of semantic markup, right? Just it's absolutely horrible. So it seems to have been built with a cross-platform type tool. But the point is that, as Mike said, this is a service that is literally life-saving that we need to create for people. And I mean, this accessibility goes beyond just helping people with visual impairments, right? It's about guiding me on what to do, right? I recently had to do some analysis on one of the corporates' website, and I deliberately, initially it was accidental, put in the incorrect information. And the error message that they kept popping up was that there's an internal technical issue, right? So I kept clicking submit on the exact same thing, and then I realized that my phone number was wrong, right? So that is a big usability thing, that if if you're not a technical person trying to figure out what this could be, like what the problem could be, you're just going to keep refreshing that and decide, okay, this thing might be down. Let me come back tomorrow and try it again. So, and I think the biggest concern for me is that when I teach and I insist on projects using semantic markup, the amount of fight back that I get from juniors is absolutely concerning. So people want to immediately jump into using Angular and React and Vue and all of these things. Something as simple as when you write HTML, just use semantic markup only. And the lengths that people will go through just to avoid that. I mean, I've been escalated because I said people shouldn't be using frameworks to build a static website, and I was escalated. So the big concerning thing is that people at a young age or people at a very young stage of their careers are already building these really bad things. So yeah, we need to find a way to teach it across the board.
I really like that.
I'm going to be that person, right?
Go ahead.
Talk about the politics of programming. And when you choose to take a hyperlink and turn it into a JavaScript click event because it makes sense to you, you're...
Oh dear.
Am I the... Oh, Mike is on a stack.
Yeah. And
Yeah, that'll teach him for trying to tell us not to use JavaScript. There is karma.
It's Mike and Rudy at the same time. It's kind of weird.
I wonder if they live close to each other. It's like load shedding just kicked in.
Interestingly enough, on that point, there was a big Twitter conversation this week that I noted about Spotify's button versus a hyperlink, where they just had a button, they prevent default, and then they navigate you to a link, right? and this was sample code to use their API, and
oh gosh. So they're telling people to use this pattern, and it's just like, no, what are you doing?
Yes, but then what I didn't expect was how many people came out to say, no, but this makes sense. Because I want this to be a button. I want it to look like a button. Yeah. And it's like...
Yeah. Look, while we wait for Mike to get back, I also wanted to make the point that if you are using a framework, like if it is appropriate for your actual website, if you're building a web application, the framework can actually help you to build more accessible websites. So if you're building, let's say, a button for argument's sake, it does allow you to say, okay, well, this button used to be an anchor tag with in the href doing some crazy JavaScript stuff. You can fix it across the whole part of your website. So that reuse allows you to say, if we can fix the accessibility in this component, we get it for free everywhere else.
Yeah, so I don't think that what Mike and Lucky are trying to say is that frameworks are completely wrong, right? I think it's more that the problem, and I've also seen it, is that people learn web development via a framework and therefore don't know the correct way of doing it. So I think like frameworks have their place, and they will still have their place in the web for a long time. But at the same time, you have to know the basics of JavaScript and HTML and all of those things before you just learn Angular or React or Vue or whatever it may be.
Yeah, you got to walk before you run. Like with any technology, it's like if you don't take the time to learn the fundamentals, you're going to end up making fundamental mistakes later on. It's like one of my biggest criticisms about the .NET framework a couple years back is most developers didn't know what was happening when they pushed the big green round button in VS Code. It's like, I push the button, the magic happens, and then my website boots up. And it's like, do you know what's happening at all? Anything? No? Okay. So, yeah. It's like Scott Hanselman talks about the layers of abstraction. Just knowing that one extra layer can mean the difference between being able to solve a problem and not.
Correct.
So the point that I was making, and I'm really sorry, I'm going to go back there. Like when you choose to have a navigation event tied to a click event in JavaScript and not to an anchor tag, you're making a choice to exclude people. You've got all of the tools and all of the language primitives, but you're choosing not to use it. And I think that that's a little bit of a problem. This example of the vaccine portal, this is a Flutter example. And Flutter is all the rage. And oh my God, you could build a Flutter app that builds on all of the platforms and on web. And it's so amazing. But this thing is a glorified canvas now. So by choosing, the government choosing to make their vaccine registration portal a Flutter app because it was expedient for them or cheaper or cooler or whatever purpose, it's resulted in being this inaccessible thing that is actually excluding people. It's a problem.
100%. So not going overboard with this, and I really, really appreciate the thoughts and process points and suggestions and like discussions that we've had. One of the most important things that I want to take out from this is that we don't have that want or need sometimes as developers to want to go and investigate the right thing to include everyone, which is including Flutter without having to have the right level of knowledge as to what kind of limitation or things or potential problems it could cause, especially for like accessibility, or just choosing not to put alt tag on an image because you either not know the basic or chose to be in an environment or learn something where those things were not made a priority. Because sometimes we teach things and we teach basics, but we don't teach basics with accessibility in mind as well. We just say, yes, there will be an image tag, but not have an alt tag. Yes, you can have like pink on, I don't know, light pink background without actually understanding it because we don't make it a priority. And it's with that kind of mind shift to say that it should be a first-class citizen or like right up there with the things that we care about to ensure that we make informed decisions about the kind of technology that we choose or the kind of approaches that we choose when we design or create those piece of technology. And yeah, I think that could be like a good first step in the right direction in trying to improve these kind of websites.
Lucky, I have a question. So I see that there's at least one junior dev on the stream watching. Are there any cool resources for juniors to learn how to do things the right way? You, as somebody who teaches this, probably have something up your sleeve.
MDN.
MDN. The solve things. Someone called it that once.
So, I think it's a combination of getting good resources, but also actively talking about the work that you're producing and being able to share it with people and get feedback from people. Because a lot of developers that create or that fall into these problems do so because that's just how they've been building it, right? They've been building with div and span for the past 10 years. So why should anything be different now? It works, right? And that's the beauty of the web in JavaScript, right? It works. I can see that it's working, but it's not necessarily working for everyone. So I think, yeah, get firstly MDN and then discuss the work that you do and get people to give you feedback on what you work on.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite accessibility statistics that I always tell people, I don't remember, I may have learned this from Mike. There's about 6% of people in the world who are colorblind, and there is now less than 1% of people in the world who use IE. Yet we still cater for IE, but we don't cater for people. Oh, Mike is calling in.
Yeah, and so when
I remember that.
when I teach about usability on the web, because that touches on performance as well. It's at the end of the day, if we're delivering products for clients and we are building sites that are not accessible, if it's a government, we've actively excluded people from getting life-saving help. If it's a corporate that is selling things, we have literally stopped people from finishing sales on their things. So we're not actually doing our work. As Mike said, we're actively excluding people from the service that we're providing. But yeah, with that said, I think we do have to move on to the third talk. We're definitely behind schedule.
That's Jerry.
Cool.
So,
All right.
okay, so rather than moving on to the third talk, because I don't think we have enough time to really do it justice, right? I think we've spoken a lot about things. I think we're going to carry on. I enjoyed this. I thought that this was really cool. I like speaking to you, and I think that there's some valuable things here. And we got a lot of off of our chest, a lot of feelings. Like how bad even fiber internet is in South Africa. I'm really sorry, everyone. I don't know what's going on. So I think we're going to have panels in future, and I'm gonna put a peg in the ground, and I'm going to suggest, if you guys are keen, that the next month we're going to talk about privacy on the web. And I think we should devote a whole topic to it because it's a big and growing topic, and it was one of the things that we wanted to talk about tonight. But it's too big for 15, 20, 30 minutes, half an hour, 6 hours. I think there are a lot of angles. There's lots of misinformation and why privacy is important and how it's changing, and how one firstly develops safely and privately, and why these privacy features are important for everybody, and how you do stuff legally. So I think that's probably what we're going to talk about. If anybody has any strong feelings or any ideas, I think you should reach out to us, either via the meetup page or via the comments in wherever this stream is going to end up living. Let us know and we'll jump on board. Do you like the format? That was smooth. That wasn't me. I didn't click that button. Okay. So we're a bunch of programmers, not video editors, and we've just discovered easy lower thirds, and we're really enjoying them. So expect lots more flashy things to happen. I don't really.
There will be videos next time.
Yeah, something along those lines. I think Jerry and I have a simple rule that only one person drives.
You were talking, so I decided to click the button this time.
Thank you very much. So can we get some final thoughts from folks about the format and what you'd like to discuss going forward to maybe give people ideas? I'm going to start with Sheena.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I found it very engaging. I often find, like we were talking before this, about how like online meetups don't necessarily need to be synchronous in the same way as they have been. Like doing a talk doesn't make it's just not as engaging. Like if I watch a talk, I want to watch it at my own time on double speed, please. So this is, I find it like much more engaging to do. I think it's also, it's really cool to bounce ideas off wholesome people who know stuff. So that's, yeah, feeling very positive about this format. Yeah.
Lucky?
Yeah, I liked it. It gave me, what do they call it? Twitter has this new feature where people just jump on and talk for hours and hours and hours on end. So it gave me that, but with the ability to go back and rewatch it. So I like it a lot. In terms of things that I'm particularly interested in us discussing, privacy on the web. I think there's a lot of moves in the tech space around privacy, and it's important for developers to keep this in their minds when we're working, particularly because I think we are exactly 30 days until POPI becomes law. So we have exactly 30 days to comply. otherwise prison time for some individuals. And GDPR also becomes a thing for those who are building apps that run or that are used everywhere else in the world. So I think there's a lot of activity around privacy that we should be discussing. And then the second one is usability on the web. Now this touches on performance, this touches on accessibility, so usability is a big topic that I'm very passionate about. So those are the two things that I'd like to discuss.
Cool.
Something that I didn't mention what I'd like to discuss. I think one thing that could be really useful to a whole lot of people is just good coding practice and good architectural patterns and that sort of thing, because people like their noodles and code should not look like noodles, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
Ryan, your thoughts?
So I think the older React versus Angular has played out, and I think doing that again is not going to get the debate anywhere further along. But I think I really liked what you and Lucky were saying about you might not need a framework. And I think a talk on how to evaluate, like, do you really need to set up a Gatsby build pipeline to output HTML? Like, maybe you do, but just perhaps some guidance around that and how to make those decisions would save us all from having to do a bunch of rewrites in the future.
It's a good one. It's a good one. I'm going to keep that one in the hat. Rudy.
Awesome. I really appreciate the format of today's talk. I cannot say it enough because it was evidence that I was way too excited about this. And I really enjoyed the approach and the conversations that we've had. I think Jerry was also up next with her talk, so I definitely think we need to give an opportunity for that. And maybe in the combination with privacy then, because it was going to be the next point that we're going to talk about. So just how we navigate that would be really awesome. And yeah, I think any conversations or any topics where we can all just also go home and investigate, so that when we are here, we just not only just receiving and consuming and listening to someone talk, but we can also just contribute. It's like pair programming where, just listening is really boring, but having to be part of the solution or be part of the conversation makes it more involving. So yeah, more of that would be amazing.
Cool. Jerry.
Cool. So before I share my opinion, I just want to share something that someone shared on the chat, and they're saying that they enjoyed the format, but it might be nice to have viewers share their thoughts as well. Yeah, so there's the comment right there. So I was just thinking about that, and maybe that's something we could address in future as well, or maybe have guests join us or something along those lines, so more people can share their thoughts, or I guess encourage people to share their thoughts in the comments, and we share them like this, so that everyone can see what other people are discussing and encourage the conversation to keep going in the comments as well. That might be something we can look into as well. And then as far as my thinking goes, yeah, I agree with Rudy in terms of this is really fun. It does force you to learn, which is really cool. It makes you go through all the other people's talks and find out what they're about, so that you can, have something to say, because you don't want to just sit here silently. I also really like the privacy and security idea. There was a lot of talks at both Google I/O and Microsoft Build on the two topics, and it will be interesting to see how these two big companies are both talking about the same thing. That was one of the things I also found with the talk I was going to do, is that I watched some of the I/O talks and some of the Build talks, and it's actually quite interesting how they are actually talking about the same things. It's really cool to see that they're all building for the same purpose, which is another idea in terms of something we could do in future for talking about new and interesting and cool things in the web, like that, like, that are still behind feature flags in Chrome or whatever browser it is you use, things like that. And I find that kind of stuff very exciting. I usually use those kinds of origin trial features, and my demos often epically fail because of it. But yeah, so that might be a future one that we can do as well. I thought that was pretty cool.
And also, like, WebAssembly, is it really the future of the web?
Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah.
So great. I think that's wonderful. I enjoyed it. I thought it was cool hanging out with you. The inspiration for this came from the fact that we normally sit and talk after a talk about the talk and about different things, and we talk before the talk, and it's always such interesting conversation. I know like 10 minutes before we were supposed to go on air, Sheena says, "How do you go about deliberate learning? Discuss." Basically, something along those lines. And it's interesting, right? Because it's so crucial for your success as a software developer in any space. And I think that could be a cool one to talk about, like how we work and how we learn. And maybe folks would learn something from that, right? I think your idea of architecture and different perspectives of architecture is really valuable. We talk a lot about sort of the ground floor in terms of this is how you build your first Gatsby app. Or this is this framework versus that framework, or this language versus that language. And very few people talk about literally everything else in between. And the things that make software hard, which is the long-reaching ramifications of, design decisions that you make. Naming things is the hardest problem in computer science.
Definitely.
Okay, so I definitely think that there's lots of topics there. If you have any ideas, please share, reach out to us, let us know. We're going to do this for a while, I think, because we enjoy it and we're lonely. And yeah, we'll see you in June.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Have a beautiful
Have an
evening.
awesome one.
Cheers.